Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our in-depth online talk with Matt Vidal on lean production, worker control, and socialist efficiency in the age of the climate crisis. So we're happy to have Matt with us here. He is a reader in sociology and political economy at the Loughborough University of London. I hope I pronounced that somewhat correctly.
Not
Um,
bad, not bad.
oh, good enough. That must suffice.
That'll
Um,
suffice.
Yes. Uh, the short description: critics of lean production, including many Marxists, argue that it is a management system that was designed to deskill labor and intensify work. It is an inherently capitalist management system that should be resisted by workers and rejected by trade unions. The implication being that it would have no place in a socialist economy and no role in socialist planning. Against this, Vidal argues that the forces of production have a relative autonomy from capitalist relation of productions, and that lean production is a general management system compatible with worker management, with worker empowerment, strong unions, and worker control. In this talk, he will argue that under socialism, worker-managed production and service organizations within and beyond manufacturing should adopt lean production methods. He will argue that socialists need to take efficiency seriously, particularly in the age of climate crisis. Will disting- He will distinguish between capitalist efficiency and socialist efficiency and argue that lean production is necessary for achieving socialist efficiency in a burning world. He will offer some reflections on the role of lean production that lean production can play in socialist planning. Some short links also in the chat. This is Matt's personal website, and he has a book that will also play a role, and he will also mention in the next slide, as you can see in the presentation, which is called Management Divided. And he was a guest on two recent episodes. Oh my god, now I fucked up the link. I'm sorry. Does anyone have the link on the first part of the from Alpha to Omega episode? Uh, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm there. It is. I forgot that Control Z exists. Here it is, and here's the second episode with Matt on from Alpha to Omega. And now we can actually get going. And Matt, take it away.
Thanks very much, Eric. Thank you, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here talking to a bunch of scholars and activists who are interested in planning and post-capitalist planning. I also want to say thanks to Tom O'Brien from the From Alpha to Omega podcast. He reached out to me because of my book. He had me on. That was really fun. And then I think Eric heard that and invited me here. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to be engaging with this type of audience. Uh, Now I can't see. There's some minor technical issues, so I can't expand my PowerPoint, and I can't see. So if you do, as mentioned earlier, if anybody has any questions for clarification, they can raise their virtual hand, and I think I will pause, or Eric will interrupt me, and we can take those questions. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A afterward. Um, so I will jump into it. I should say I mean, I've been reading about some stuff about socialist planning and post-capitalist planning, but it's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise has been labor process, work organization, and labor management and employment relations. And now I'm also increasingly working on capitalist growth regimes, looking at the relation between profits and wages and investment. So I've been trying to understand capitalism and its problems, and not trying to focus on planning. But I see this connection here with my work on lean production, so I'm keen to get into it. So hopefully we can have a good conversation at the end. Let's see if I can get this going. Yeah. I'm gonna lose all my animations because it's not in full screen, where I have my points come on one at a time, but we'll deal with it. So as mentioned, I just published this book. It was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, 2022. It's called Management Divided, Contradictions of Labor Management. It I was trying to understand the labor process, and I went in and studied a bunch of manufacturing companies. Um, so I ended up interviewing 109 people in 31 manufacturing firms. I didn't, mostly in the US Midwest. I did not set out to study lean production as such, but when I went into the field, that's the only thing anybody was talking about. That's what modern manufacturing is. Contemporary manufacturing is lean production. This was about 20 years ago now when I was actually doing these interviews, but it remains the case today that contemporary manufacturing is synonymous with lean production. As you can see on the slide, lean production is increasingly going into other sectors, including healthcare, banking, education, and so on. Just very briefly, in the study for the book, I interacted with a total of 486 people. I was able to interview formally 109 of those, which included 47 managers or engineers, 59 workers, and 3 union business agents. This was again all in the U.S. The companies, 7 of the companies were brand name multinational contractors, each doing over $1 billion in sales per year. You would know, or I think almost all of you would know most, if not all, of those names of those companies. The bulk of what I did then was really focusing on their suppliers, on their supply chain, on their domestic supply chain. So I studied 21 supplier firms doing complex subassemblies and other complex parts. Uh, and so that's the basis of this study. So as I said, I didn't set out to study lean production as such, but I set out to study manufacturing, and that means studying lean production. Um, when I went into the field, I was deeply influenced by what was the dominant Marxist sociology of the work at the time, which goes back to Harry Braverman, who wrote Labor and Monopoly Capital. And he started out he reinvigorated contemporary labor process theory in the 1970s. Of course, Marx used the term labor process to refer to the cooperation of and the division of labor to produce goods and services. Um, so Braverman had this particular theory of the capitalist labor process. David Noble is another big name here. He wrote a fantastic book called Forces of Production, which is a study of the development of machine tools in the U.S. Um, and the argument that comes from Braverman and that was adopted and extended by Noble and many others was that capitalists pursue the deskilling of labor absolutely in all cases in order to protect their class power. So the argument here was that managers will often choose uh, control of labor over choosing the most efficient production process. And of course, I thought that was all fascinating. And I read a bunch of studies of lean production, and they said lean production it's nothing more than a highly refined system for deskilling and for work intensification. And that was the view I had from the Marxists. And when I went into the field and started talking to managers and workers, it didn't really jibe with what I was seeing. In fact, I met some managers who were saying things like, "I want the workers down there in self-directed teams on the shop floor as multi-skilled as possible, running production in their own self-directed teams." And I had some workers in about 4 or 5 firms who had experienced 4 or 5 of the firms who had experienced high levels of empowerment by their managers. Um, so this argument extends to a broader argument about the relation between capitalism and technology and technological change. And David Noble is the one who makes this argument most forcefully. He says that because capitalists and their managers are always concerned with disempowering labor and protecting their class power through deskilling, that this concern with labor control is so overwhelming that it even extends to engineers and the design of machine tools. and that machine tools were designed in ways that where they made decisions. This machine tool would be more efficient if we allowed the workers to control it, but we're going to be able to de-skill labor with a less efficient tool, so we're going to adopt that. Um, in other words, technological change as such within capitalism, technological change, the trajectory of technological change is warped in service of increasing the exploitation of labor and disempowering labor and workers and their unions. I've got a Yates this quote right here at the bottom, where Yates in Monthly Review summarizes Braverman: the essence of capitalist management is control over the labor process, and therefore control over the worker. And I just that just wasn't aligning with what I was seeing, both talking to workers and to managers. And so let's see if I can get this to work. Um, and so what I did, well, let me go through. So there's some other Marxists. Kim Moody, the late Kim Moody, who was the leading intellectual of Labor Notes, which is the radical labor organization outside of Detroit, very influential, and I think that Labor Notes does a lot of incredible work, important work. Um, but I think that Moody got lean production wrong. So Kim Moody in his book Workers in the Lean World describes lean, equates lean with outsourcing, downsizing, ideological co-optation, whipsawing, work casualization, even part-time work. So he wants to say lean production is everything bad that any manager has ever done in the last 30 years or so.
Super
I
shortly,
think this,
Matt.
yeah,
Sorry, super quickly. Can you maybe just to get everyone on the same baseline, can you maybe give a short summary like what lean production actually is, or can you, or are you
Yeah,
going to do that?
I'm
And
going to define it
okay,
in a few slides, and
perfect,
I think it will be much easier if I just define it in a few slides, if that's okay.
perfect. Just
Um,
what? Yeah, thank you.
but I mean, for now, we can say it's just-in-time production, right? It's demand-driven, just-in-time production with low inventories, and delivering producing only what one needs for the orders that there is for. So I'll come back to that. So Yeah, so what I want to say is lean is a specific management system consisting of just-in-time production, total quality management, and continuous improvement. Um, okay, Mike Parker is another one of the labor process. Another one of the labor notes people, and he argues here in a recent issue of Catalyst journal that features of lean production that might appear to provide worker control are actually about enabling tight management control of work. And the success of Japanese companies, including Toyota and others, in capturing huge amounts of the world market in autos over the last 20, 30 years depends in large part on intensifying work, super exploiting workers, reducing workers' power, and destroying or containing independent unions. Um, so that what's the reason that he's talking about this stuff is because lean production talks about empowering labor, empowering workers through teamwork and forms of employee involvement in problem solving and decision making. And they are so Parker's the leading critic of lean production, and he insists that no, there is no empowerment that happens in lean production whatsoever. And he makes this remarkable claim that the reason that Toyota beat out GM and Ford was simply because it exploited them workers more intensively. It had nothing to do with building in any other capabilities for quality or continuous improvement. Okay, it's in this kind of context that I came to lean, and I saw a lot of managers trying to empower their workers through cross training, through multi skilling, getting workers to work into teams to do just in time production, so that they work with very low inventories and they produce only what there's orders for. And continuous improvement is supposed to be a key thing here, and so the workers are contributing to problem solving and decision making. And I wasn't ready to say that's all bullshit, which is exactly what Mike Parker says right here. He says it's all bullshit. There's no empowerment. It cannot happen because the managers designed lean production and they designed it to control workers. I'm going to argue that that's not that that's I think that's a misinterpretation of the Toyota production system. And to do that, I went back and reread Marx, and I came up with an alternative to the Bravermanian approach. So Braverman, I call Braverman a neo-Marxist because I think that he rejects Marx's argument that capitalism and that human society is fundamentally contradictory, that there's a contradiction between the forces and relations of production, and that we might expect contradictory processes and outcomes within capitalism. So, my reading of Marx from Capital Volume 1 and other sources is that he argues that technical change, technology and technological development has a relative autonomy from class relations, that with even within the workplace, the capitalist management has to be concerned with more than control. This is kind of my reading. The second point is my reading, which I think is consistent with Marx, is that yes, managers have to ensure the extraction of surplus labor and surplus value from workers, but they also need to be concerned about the overall division of labor, how they're going to use technology, the scale and scope of production. They have to be concerned with workflow, product quality, flexibility, continuous improvement. And so I'm trying to make an argument, and then I'll go back to Marx here and see how we can make this argument. And my argument then is that capitalist management is increasingly a source of organizational inefficiency because managers are failing to empower workers for various reasons. So they are satisficing. That satisficing means um, uh, settling for good enough or opting for what is satisfactory rather than optimal. So it's in contrast to maximizing. Um, so going back to some basics here on Marx distinguished between the forces and relations of production. Oftentimes we think of the forces of production as technology, but it's more specific for Marx. For Marx, the forces of production were fundamentally social, and most importantly, when he spends multiple chapters, an entire section of Capital Volume 1, talking about the forces of production as cooperation and the division of labor. So he calls these the forces of social labor. He used to call them the forces of social labor before he called them the forces of production. Um, so all the rest of this stuff, machines, machine tools, the role of science, these for Marx are almost in a secondary position compared to the most fundamental productive force is the division of labor of human beings cooperating to produce goods and services. The relations of production then refer to the structure of ownership and control over the means of production. And for Marx, there's a fundamentally contradictory interaction between the forces and relations of production that drives historical development and technological change. And so technological change was slower under slave-based and feudal modes of production, but it's become rapid under capitalist relations of production. And my reading of Marx is that he allows a relative autonomy of technology and the forces of production. So what we can say is that we can say, well, I'll pause and I'll come to it. So Marx certainly argued that the detail, what he called the detailed division of labor, where each worker does one thing and one thing only over and over again, that this was degrading and alienating. But across a range of his works, I think he expresses very clearly a view of science and technology as relatively autonomous domains that develop with relative autonomy from class relations. So he distinguished technological development in general from specifically capitalist uses of or motivations for developing technology. Here's a quote at the bottom from Marx: "Science, generally speaking, costs the capitalist nothing, a fact that by no means hinders him from exploiting it." So he's saying there's science that develops outside of capitalism and capitalists use it. Um, So within the labor process, then within the workplace, Marx argued that managers have dual roles. They have a productive role in the coordination, planning and division, planning of the division of labor and developing labor, and an unproductive role in ensuring discipline. And so I think we can see in Marx that Marx himself says that managers have a lot more to do than just ensure discipline in the extraction of surplus labor effort. So what I think all of this kind of quick run through Marx on technology and forces of production, what I think this does is it suggests that we need to distinguish productive models from management strategies. And I think we can argue that many productive models were developed for reasons that are in addition to maximizing the exploitation of labor. So Taylorism, Fordism, lean production, these are production models, and they need to be distinguished from the managerial strategy of intensifying labor. So we're thinking about Fordism as mass production. We need large scale production for efficiencies in society. And to get these efficiencies of large scale production, this requires a detailed division of labor. Um, and and so there is going to have to be some division of labor. The question is whether one of the questions is whether one person does one job only, whether they rotate through all of the positions. Um, so for Marx, first and foremost, uh, or from my reading of Marx, I think that this aligns with his understanding of the forces of production, is that first and foremost, production models are sets of organizational principles for establishing a division of labor and a flow of production. And the role of machine tools and mechanization and automation are really secondary considerations here. And then these things need to be distinguished from work intensification. Managers can adopt these models without intensifying labor. So here's a production. Now into the definition of lean production. So before the definition, I argue that lean production is a general management system to address the broader set of competitive demands around organizational flexibility and improved product or service quality in the contemporary society. I define lean as these three things in the middle. So JIT is just in time production. So Fordist production could be called just in case production. You try and forecast the market. You try and see how many products you've got demand for over some time period that you forecasted, and then you produce as much as you can, and you push them onto the market. Whereas the just-in-time Toyota system comes from attempts to do a pull production system, where in principle you only produce a car or whatever when you have an order for that car and no more. And so what just-in-time production does, just-in-time, that's Taiichi Ono. He was the founder of the just-in-time system at Toyota, and that gives you a set of principles and practices for how to produce based on customer demand with minimal work in process inventories and minimal final inventories. So massively reducing inventories throughout the system. So my argument is that that's one element of lean production. A second element is total quality control, and the main author here was Ishikawa, Kaoru Ishikawa. He worked more at Nissan than at Toyota, and JUSE is the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers. Um, Actually, there were quality control guys, Deming and Duran from the States, but the American companies didn't care about it, and they didn't get an audience, so they went to Japan where they did get an audience. And Ishikawa is the guru here, who's written the most about this. And my argument is that this was developed kind of society wide in Japan, and also adopted by Toyota as the model that we know as lean production today. And finally, continuous improvement. And the guru there was Shigeo Shingo. And he worked more at Mazda than at Toyota. But these things, this was happening in Japan. TQM and continuous improvement, quality movements, and these are closely related, were happening throughout Japanese manufacturing. Um, and Ono at Toyota introduced the just-in-time system and then grafted onto it total quality control and continuous improvement. And so my argument here is that these engineers, they weren't class warriors in the sense that Braverman and Noble and others would say they are. They weren't when they were when Ichikawa was thinking about total quality control, and when Shingo was thinking about continuous improvement, they weren't, their primary goals were not, let's see how much we can disempower labor and deskill labor. That was not their goals. And so this is why I'm saying that these production systems have a relative autonomy from class relations. In this bottom bullet point, beyond large scale production is the subtitle of Ono's book called Toyota Production System, Beyond Large Scale Production. I think what he means by that is he means mass production. So where Ford's mass production was just exclusively based on economies of scale, that was the basis of efficiency. Toyota, the TPS, is mass production, including economies of scope, economies of flexibility, and continuous improvement. So that's how I understand lean production. In practice, what it means is it means working. Most of the work happens in little production cells where you've got all of the tools and machines that you need to make a product in a single area, and you make one continuous flow. They talk about one piece flow or continuous flow production. So it's demand driven continuous flow production, with workers empowered in teams where if they see a problem, they can pull the button, push the button, or pull the cord and stop the line and immediately problem solve and fix the problem. And so therefore engage in both quality control and continuous improvement. Um, let me do one more slide and just take a quick break for any clarifying questions. So my evidence, I present extensive, I think, and irrefutable evidence that even in contemporary capitalism, even in the United States, which is the heart of liberal or neoliberal capitalism in the world, you can have lean production implemented with high levels of worker empowerment and without work intensification. This is most likely under some sort of union management partnership. I have a PhD student who's just finished his PhD, and he studied worker co-ops, and the worker co-ops are doing lean production. Um, it reminds one of Lenin advocating Taylorism in the Soviet Union. Um, and my argument here is that even under socialism or post-capitalism, um, that worker managed production and service organizations should adopt lean production for reasons of efficiency. Now, the second half of the talk, I'll talk about socialist efficiency and capitalist efficiency, and try and relate it to climate crisis, and some thoughts on planning. But I could stop now if there's any questions.
Yes, everyone feel free to like raise their digital hand right now. Otherwise, you will get a next chance in the second
Okay.
half. Like, don't worry, everyone. Ah,
Okay.
Vera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can never find the button for how to raise my digital hand. But I have I guess I think I have a question and a half. My
Mm-hmm.
first question is when you were summarizing the position on kind of coming from, I guess, the interpretation of the Braverman about how the need to control labor supersedes all the other stuff. I was wondering if you could situate within that argument the like the people speaking from within like even maybe a Braverman tradition that didn't believe that that was true or that what people were necessarily doing. And I put it in the chat. I kind of was like the Sheila Cohen like labor process to nowhere sort of perspective. And I think the question and a half component is that I think that there is like a maybe more modern version of that conversation, which is talking about um how the logic of the production process also has to deal with the external logic of valorization with like kind of reconciling with the market. And I was just wondering how you would put yourself with all of this because I find it confusing.
Yeah,
So
okay.
super quickly, because this seems like a bigger question right now. Is it okay if we put it at the end? Because normally we
Yeah,
don't
that's a big
record the
question. Can
discussion.
we take that question at the end if that's okay?
Yeah,
Thank,
Yeah,
y-
I'm happy to answer it and have that discussion, but it's going to take a while, I think.
awesome.
thanks.
Also, yeah, Vera, feel free to
Simon.
like re-articulate it at the end of it. Yeah, James, sorry.
Oh, no, you go.
Yeah, Simon, you have the hand. If it's like an understanding
Yes.
question right now.
Well, my question is, well, I don't know if it's understanding. I want to suggest, if it's possible for you, sorry, I cannot open my camera because the internet area is crap.
Sure.
I want to suggest that you touch on the use of lean production in the public sector, which is quite contested in many countries. And I haven't heard you about it. So if you're in your second act, you could touch on this, I would be very glad. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Um, okay, I don't see any. Do you see any, Eric?
No, that also seemed to be like something like either you can touch now or like we put it into the second half
I'm
of
gonna
the talk. Like,
I'm gonna come back to that one at the end too.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Also, like short time feedback. We're now like almost like we're now 35 minutes into it. So just so you have
Yeah,
like an
okay.
overview. Okay, yeah.
I think I'll finish in 20 minutes. Is that okay? Or less? Okay. All right.
And
I'm gonna jump back
15
into
minutes
it.
would be better. Yeah.
15?
Yes, would be better. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Tell me when I have 5 minutes left, will you?
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so I'll come back to those very good questions at the end. Right. So I've been arguing. I was trying to argue this before the climate crisis, and now it seems so obvious that it's less necessary to argue. But socialists need to take efficiency seriously, particularly in the age of climate crisis, soil depletion, global warming, rising sea levels, all of this stuff. If we're going to remain at this target of not heating above 1.5 C above pre-industrial levels, efficiency is at an absolute efficiency is of the utmost importance. So I thought it would be useful just to give a couple of basic definitions. Both of these come from the Cambridge Dictionary. If efficient as an adjective refers to using resources such as time, materials, or energy without wasting any. And if we think about efficiency in that sense, we can see that capitalism is radically inefficient in so many ways. So we can talk about capitalist inefficiency. Now, it might be the case that capitalism has some sort of allocative efficiency in terms of allocating resources at the macroeconomic level in some sort of efficient way, although I think that's contestable too. Um, but we know that in addition to the failure to meet the basic needs of the many on the planet, it's highly efficient in many ways. So we have overproduction all of the time, and the production all sorts of externalities, including eco externalities. So these are things that are costs of production that don't get captured in the price, right? So when you're polluting, when you're capitalist corporation, you're polluting the river. That's a cost. That's an externality. So capitalism is radically inefficient, especially from this perspective of externalities and what we might call eco externalities. Also, from the perspective of unemployment and underemployment, so there's a radical underuse of resources, among other things. We have all of this labor that could be put to better uses that's being not used. We have, of course, recurring recessions. This next point, widespread failure to adopt the leanest capabilities. That's the argument of my book, is that managers generally aren't adopting the most efficient capabilities because they're not empowering their workers for various reasons we can go into, but mainly because it's really hard to do so. It's less about power and more about it's just easy to not empower workers. Think about all the advertising, all the money all the resources that are wasted on advertising, trying to get people to buy things they don't need. And think about all of the electricity going into. So this is the anarchy of the market, right? This is one of the things of the anarchy of the market is that you've got so many companies trying to capture the market for AI, for generative AI. Um, there's massive duplication of resources and massive amounts of electricity that goes to keep these AI chatbots running. Just huge amounts of waste from multiple different perspectives. So we could say that in one sense, capitalist efficiency refers to whatever is profitable. I mean, but then we can distinguish, economists distinguish between allocative efficiency and technical efficiency. Allocative efficiency refers to the allocation of resources, and of course they use this concept of Pareto optimality. As long as all the trades have been made and no one else can make a trade without making someone else worse off, that's said to be efficient. Certainly debatable from different perspectives of resource usage from these original dictionary definitions. And then, of course, technical efficiency, which is organizational efficiency. It's about inputs and outputs. Generally, this type of input-output efficiency is focused for capitalists on cutting labor costs, and often through sweating labor. And of course, it generally fails to take into account any number of externalities. So these notions of efficiency are very deeply problematic. What I want to do then is propose this concept of socialist efficiency. I get this idea from a paper of David Gordon that's like 1976, I think, in Monthly Review, where he has a paper called Capitalist Efficiency and Socialist Efficiency. Now, I actually didn't go back and read that for this talk. I skimmed it. I didn't find any good, clear definitions, so I've come up with my own definitions. The first 2 points are sort of principles. Earth is the source of much of our wealth, and labor is the source of our value, of turning things of creating more wealth and value out of existing natural wealth. So we might say that we might define socialist efficiency as output efficiency accounting for all known costs over the long term. And this is a thing about capitalist efficiency. It's incredibly short term. It's as short term as thinking as possible, and so that's one problem with it. Socialists should try to think about midterm and long term costs. This type of efficiency would see in any form of involuntary work intensification as a cost. Sweating workers is not efficient. And so I can see that we might put in a right of workers to complain about work intensification with no excuse, just saying you're working me too hard. And so the principles are that we try to take into account all known costs, including the costs of work intensification, and including all known externalities regarding to emissions, pollution, so on, and also social impacts about poverty, inequality, social exclusion, and so on. I'm going to start getting into more questions than answers toward the end of this, but I'm going to give some principles that I hope will hopefully be useful for talking about planning with a group here that knows a lot more about planning than I do. So no role for the market in determining efficiency. So allocative efficiency and technical efficiency really are seen as the market ultimately determines what's efficient and what's not. I think if we want to embrace a concept of socialist efficiency, we need to acknowledge that the market has little or no role at all in determining what is and isn't efficient. In contemporary workplaces with contemporary unions, I could see how these principles of socialist efficiency could be bargained for into a collective agreement. They could also be legislated in terms of and made policy at various levels of the state. And I think there's an open question here. Would we just abandon Pareto efficiency for another principle? I think we probably would, because its idea that you can't make anybody else worse off. If you've got a millionaire or billionaire and a poverty person, if you try and redistribute something, that's going to be seen as inefficient. So maybe Marxist principle of from each according to ability to each according to their needs. I guess these needs probably have to be determined democratically, probably through some sort of participatory budgeting procedure. In any
Matt,
case, so what? So
Matt,
yeah,
super quickly,
yeah,
if you can wrap it up in about like 5 or 7 minutes, that would be like
yep,
pretty good. Okay,
yep,
thank you.
yep. So what can lean contribute? So Justin, so I think in a post-capitalist economy, we would still be using just-in-time for delivery and final inventory. We would be using it for production and for work in progress inventory. Value stream mapping here, VSM, that's a key principle which I think every organization in the socialist society will want to do, and I think this can map onto some broader stuff about circular economy. We still want total quality management, I think, and we still want continuous improvement. So in terms of democratic participation, my argument in the book is that lean is not only fully compatible with worker control, but by eliminating private ownership and permanent managerial hierarchies, organizations will become more dynamically efficient and more able to realize socialist efficiency, because permanent managerial hierarchies and private property are obstacles to these. I'll just note that planning takes place. The corporations do extensive amounts of planning today. So just take Toyota; they sell 10 million cars a year, and they bring in $400 billion US dollars a year. That entails extensive amounts of planning. So they're already doing extensive amounts of planning, and just in time and lean is critical to their planning procedures. So I just got 2 more slides left. One question for me, and I'm hoping that some people in the audience um, can get back to me. I haven't had Tom O'Brien hasn't sent me his book yet, so I haven't had a chance to read it. So I'm a little bit behind the times on these. But one thing to note is that just-in-time, a core just-in-time principle is that you only produce something when there's an order for it or demand for it. So we don't produce a bunch of stuff and fill up warehouses or storefronts with it. We only produce when there's an order for it. But of course, Toyota and every other capitalist company does have to plan for materials. They do materials resource planning. They do enterprise resource planning. My understanding is that they try to plan at 3, 6, and 12 month time frames. And I think this is really tricky for them. It's going to be trickier once we try to extend it beyond the level of an individual organization. So I'm guessing that a socialist economy would require planning at a national level for some things wherever the national scale is the most efficient, and I'm assuming that maybe the principle of subsidiarity applies here, and that we would plan at the lowest possible level where it could be efficiently done. One open issue is that I think that if we want to do some sort of sustainable socialist just-in-time production, people probably going to have to wait a little bit longer to get their things than they have to do today in the capitalist world. And finally, just to end on some questions, some open questions. Do we need degrowth or sustainable growth? I note against the degrowth position that there's an urgent need to raise living standards for much of the world, including much of the global south. I can see a relation with some circular economy type stuff. So you start with democratic planning, and then you do sustainable design, and then you do lean production, lean distribution, and lean reuse repair. Um, I'm wondering if this kind of idea of the donut economy, where there's a minimum social foundation that we need to be above, but there's an ecological ceiling that we need to be below. I'm wondering if this is a feasible idea. And I suspect that just-in-time production will have a critical role in doing all of these things efficiently and sustainably. And finally, just to note, so I talked about my book. I also drew some parts of the first part of the talk from this article in Catalyst. So I think I will stop sharing and turn off my sharing so I can see everybody. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will now stop the recording and then we can open it up for the discussion. Thanks,
Okay,
Matt, first of
should I
all.
take those questions first that we had?
First, I will end the recording right here. And thanks for
Yeah.
everybody who watched this on YouTube.